Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. We're here once again with Britonia. I am playing as them this time. We're going to be facing up against the vampires, and it's time to apply some of the principles that we've learned in the testing video that I released earlier today. And let's see what we can do. So we do have a force led by the Fey Enchantress here. In terms of spell loadout, she's carrying Earthblood as well as Flesh to Stone. Flesh to Stone is a pretty cheap spell. It lasts quite a long time at 44 seconds. Does have a pretty hefty recharge as well. However, it's plus 60 armor, which is huge. Armor is the most important of any of the mitigation stats. Even against armor piercing, it helps to a degree there even still, but on a unit like Grail Knights, for example, Grail Knights have 90 armor, which is good. It's not the best for heavy cavalry. A lot of other heavy cavalry units have more armor. Even the lower tier heavy cavalry like Empire Knights has more armor than Grail Knights. Where Grail Knights get a lot of their mitigation from is their physical resistance, and obviously they're immune to vigor, have a lot else going for them. But if you can hit him with that Flesh to Stone, that'll put him up to 150 armor, and I mean that's as much armor as a steam tank, and it's more than any other heavy cavalry in the game that I can remember at the moment. There might be another one that's more. I don't think so though. I think that's the most that would be more than any that currently exists. But hitting him with that Flesh to Stone is going to make them super tanky. So yeah, we've got one Grail Knight here and two more over on the far side. We've got one Grail Guardian here as kind of a sweeper in the rear. We've got one Blessed Field Trebuchet, and even in matchups where the magic damage isn't super pertinent, I like the Blessed Field Trebuchet better because it does much more missile damage, which is important because the Trebuchet is not super accurate. You want every shot to count, so it is important to have that extra missile damage. Got a front line meat shield of peasant mobs, backed up by a second line of spearmen at arms with shields. These guys have a couple chevrons, bringing their melee defense up to 42, which is actually really nice for a lower tier infantry. This is going to allow them to hold for quite some time, which then allows the knights to act as the hammer. Now, my opponent has brought a very wide vampire army, which is definitely a pretty good army, I would say. He's got a unit of Blood Knights here, who, of course, are one of the best shock cavalry in the game, have 78 charge bonus, anti-large, 110 armor, and of course, being vampires, they can resurrect unit models, which is really nice. They do also have missile resistance when engaged in melee, which is potentially interesting. Frenzy as well, and some other decent stats. He's also got the Red Duke up on a zombie dragon, which is a very strong choice. You can be pretty safe, bringing a zombie dragon in this matchup in most situations, just because the Bretonians really can't challenge in the air like they used to be able to, because Pegasus Knights aren't as strong as they used to be. Lewin will get destroyed by the Red Duke on a zombie dragon, so definitely it is a risk, a bit of a risk to bring the Red Duke in the air, but it's relatively safe. I do agree with that pick. He's also got the Dire Pack, which have currently intercepted my Grail Knights there. A little bit of mismicro on my part, but that's okay. Front line of zombies, got plenty of them. Looks like 6 zombies. We've got 1, 2, 3 Skeleton Spears and 2 Grave Guard, as well as the Claw of Nagash Mortis Engine. So it looks like this is going to be one of his key damage-dealing focus points. And a Corpse Cart with the Unholy Lodestone for that regeneration and Vigor Mortis. Corpse Carts are kind of actually coming back into the meta a little bit. I don't know if they got a health buff or what in Mortal Empires, but they seem to be pretty decent. The Vigor Mortis is really nice, obviously. Plus 5 melee attack and defense is huge, considering that vampire units generally have very poor combat stats. And of course, the Unholy Lodestone is just another healing mechanism that the vampires can bring, meaning they're going to be very tanky. But I did miss a little bit of an engagement over here. I actually cast Flesh to Stone on these Grail Knights, so they're up to 150 armor, and look at how decisively they won. Both of these units just basically went in on a head-up charge, and we crushed those Blood Knights, so much so that my opponent's actually pulling them away very wisely. But Grail Knights are faster. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like their attack order's pathing quite correctly at the moment, so they're not chasing very effectively. But, we can potentially catch these Blood Knights on a longer engagement. The Dire Pack, although they did get it and do some nice damage initially, are going to get crushed by the, obviously superior combat stats of these Grail Knights here, even though it was a bit of mismicro there to get caught out. I definitely should have been keeping those Grail Knights a little bit closer in a more defensive position. There's really no reason for me to go out. I believe my original intention was just to come run some cheeky cycle charges, but honestly, it's not a huge deal here. I'm going to have to pull these Grail Knights back, let them get a little bit overexposed here, but we will be able to pull away from that engagement and not take too much damage. We actually haven't even yet lost a single unit model on that unit of Grail Knights, still going strong at 45 unit models, so good stuff. The Blessed Field Trebuchet originally got 1 or 2 nice hits on the Blood Knights, but unfortunately I am targeting the zombies right now. A bit of a misclick, should have been targeting this Graveguard, but that's alright. We are going to hit these guys with an Earthblood, since they are a little bit wounded here, and the main infantry engagement is going to be getting underway, so we'll be bringing things up. Going to try and get a second engagement here, but my opponent very wisely pulling away and screening very nicely with these Skeleton Spears. However, Skeleton Spears are, they just don't have the combat stats to be able to actually hit Grail Knights very effectively. Only 14 attack means that, Grail Knights with their 30 defense will be able to defend most of their attacks. The infantry engagement is going off kind of haphazardly here. The peasant mobs are just going to be blocking up a lot of these zombie hordes here and just kind of creating a bit of an anvil. We are charging these side units of Grail Knights in now and doing a ton of damage on granted fodder units, but we are going to need to clear these guys out eventually, getting a bit of a drain from the Mortis engine here, but I'm going to hook up and around here with the Fey Enchantress. I want to make sure to try and stay near to these Grail Knights, because the Red Duke tries to come down. He'll do a ton of damage here. I was kind of losing this engagement over here because I wasn't very, supporting very well with infantry. We are going to get the peasant mobs screening out over on this side, and then get the spearmen moving in there to help, kind of bog those guys down. Peasant archers have been taking dragon breaths, which is a bit unfortunate, but, considering they're such a cheap unit, that's quite alright. We've been able to catch the Red Duke here in the center with the Grail Knights just kind of acting as a sweeper in the rear. They're going to be catching him out, and my opponent's doing exactly what you should do in this situation, which is run towards your own lines. Heavy cavalry can't pull through infantry very well in this game, so if you run through your own lines and the opposing infantry gets caught up on them, then you'll be able to fly out and get back up in the air and cycle back around. But meanwhile, we're just pulling back the peasant bows as soon as they rally. Going to be trying to apply some poison damage on that Klob Nagash. Has taken a little bit of damage so far, but Grail Guardians have just been put into the front line to act as kind of a tank here in the center to help hold this center pocket in place, and the Spearmen at Arms with shields now being activated as well to act as a kind of a reserve now that most of the peasant mobs have routed off. Fortunately, there are still a few pockets being compromised here. You can see right here my opponent has actually broken through. Hasn't quite passed through, looks like, yet onto the Trebuchet, but we do still have one unit of Spearmen holding here. They're actually holding back these Blood Knights pretty effectively. Very nice there, and going to be just pulling, again, just pulling back the Grail Knights, kind of in this situation. I could be potentially flanking around and coming for rear charges here, but since my opponent has so many more units of infantry than I do, I figured it was safer that just keep the Grail Knights kind of as a sweeper position here. If my opponent summons zombies or like these Tithe here that have broken through, I can then come in with the Knights and kind of, get on them and potentially silence them to keep this Trebuchet and these Peasant Bowmen online for as long as possible. We have mostly broken through a lot of the zombies here. The Mortis Engine Drain is not hitting a whole lot of units here. If we actually slow it down, we can take a look at the area of effect. Let's see. So the Reliquary is actually not hitting too many of my units. It might actually be hitting this Peasant Mob here, but that circle needs to be hitting the center mass of the units. So if he were to just pull forward even slightly to maybe like right here, if I can draw right there, then he'd be hitting all these units in this kind of pocket all here, and it would be a lot better. But, it's just a game of inches, as I like to say. Warhammer is definitely a game of inches, so we're getting these Grail Knights back onto the Tithe here to try and spring this Blessed Field Trebuchet free, and bringing up these Grail Knights just to try and screen. The Fey Enchantress is obviously very squishy, and this Grail Relic as well as a high-value target. It's helping hold together the leadership of all the units kind of in this pocket here. So it's very, very important that I keep that thing safe. The Skeleton Spearmen aren't going to do anything to Grail Guardians just because Grail Guardians have 56 melee defense and 19 attack. Even with the buff from the Corpse Cart, only 19 attack is really not going to make very good contact at all. We supporting over on this infantry engagement here with these Grail Knights, just trying to punish the last of the Blood Knights here. Once the Blood Knights go down, then the Red Duke is really the only thing that can kill my Grail Knights effectively. So with the Blood Knights down, they are crumbling now and will be dropping very, very shortly, just popping off the last of their unit models there. We can now turn our attention to the Red Duke on his zombie dragon. You can see these Grail Knights here getting a brutal charge, just smashing through zombies and skeletons alike, and getting in on the Red Duke and doing some nice armor-piercing damage. Every time he comes down to the ground, I just need to charge in with the Grail Knights, make sure they connect on a good charge, deal quite a bit of damage, and punish him every time he comes to the ground. So these Skeleton Spearmen are about crumbled by the Grail Guardians here, and the Mortis Engine as well, taking a ton of damage, surprising amount from the Peasant Bowman with the Pox Arrows, regrouped over on the far side. Red Duke doing exactly what he should, getting on these Peasant Arrows, but he needs to get back up in the air immediately because if he takes a charge from these Grail Knights, he's going to take quite a bit of damage, and you can see them connecting on the charge there, doing some decent damage. Red Duke looks like he's going to be summoning up some zombies to try and spring himself free. Very good play there. The Ballistic Field Trebuchet, unfortunately, I did have to pull the Grail Knights away from that tide there and let the Field Trebuchet fend for itself. But, you know, tide are crumbling, and if I kind of keep the crew away, they'll be able to come back onto the piece in just a moment. The center pocket here is starting to turn in my favor. The Spearmen-at-Arms have been doing a great job holding out. We actually did buff this one here. I'm not sure if I missed it yet, but I did buff this one here in the center pocket with Shield of Thorns. So you think about it, a unit with you know, this much melee defense, 40 melee defense, and with that buff they go up to 90 armor. They can tank out quite a bit of damage. It's actually pretty decent. You can see my opponent's casting a Wind of Death. It's a not overcast because it didn't do a whole lot of damage there, and even then it probably doesn't do quite as much to cavalry units, I don't think. But these Grail Guardians are still very healthy, 42 unit models, and still taking that Earth Blood. Going to be tanking out a ton of damage here in the center pocket. And yeah, Grail Knights are crumbling what's left of my opponent's infantry. These Spearmen-at-Arms, unfortunately, are wavering here, but they have held these Skeleton Spears up on the flank for quite some time, and the war of attrition is underway. We've got the Fey Enchantress. She's just been kind of sitting in this center pocket here, applying that Mortis Engine effect to this entire blob of troops here. And now that most of the infantry is gone for the vampire counts, you can see the Red Duke mostly surrounded now by the Bretonnian Knights here, and the Mortis Engine also mostly surrounded here. We've got peasants in for support as well. Pox Arrows coming in, just poisoning the Red Duke and dragging him down into the mud. The drain from the Fey Enchantress as well, of course. And it is looking to be a victory for Bretonnia. And words I don't get to say too often in this patch, but the balance of power is tilting in my favor. And you can see that we are going to be able to carry the day. So, well played to my opponent. He did make some very nice moves in trying to screen out my Grail Knights, but I just don't think he quite had the tools to take down this many elite shock cavalry units. The one unit of Blood Knights was just not enough. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the army breakdown and kind of talk about things. So, from my perspective, I mean, you just look at the Grail, you know, the Grail Knights and the Grail Guardians here. 3 chevrons on this unit of Grail Knights and 181 kills. 325 kills, 2 chevrons on this Grail Knight. Granted, a lot of those are zombies, but still, 325 kills, guys. That is ridiculous. 173 here, and again, 2 chevrons. Grail Guardians didn't get any chevrons, but 233 kills, just chopped through the chaff. Like, you know, like a blender, basically. A very slow blender, but still very effective. Hardly took any damage, and absolute tanks there in that front line. Peasant Bowmen actually did a pretty decent amount of damage. They were able to regroup kind of in that second and third quarter there and apply some really nice pressure to the Mortis Engine and the Red Duke. Red Duke did get 96 kills, roasted quite a few of those archers, but it wasn't quite enough to keep him off the battlefield. The Spearmen-at-Arms got a respectable number of kills considering, you know, they're fighting fodder tier units. Same thing with this peasant mob. You know, when a peasant mob gets 52 kills, there's nothing to complain about there. But the Spearmen-at-Arms did a really good job of holding out and kind of keeping their leadership and melee defense together. Grail Relic definitely helps in that. And the fact that we're able to keep the Fey Enchantress healthy and draining that center pocket and just perpetually giving that healing and the Flesh to Stone as well mitigated a ton of damage. Really kept this pain train rolling. So kind of just applying the principles I've been talking about for the last couple of videos, and this is definitely the way I like to go as Bretonnia. It's not foolproof by any means. In fact, it's very micro intensive. So if you do plan to use this build, be confident with your micro and make sure that you use your hot groups appropriately. For this, just as a quick example here, I can kind of show you guys what I do in terms of hot grouping, just as kind of a quick little aside here. We'll jump into a custom battle real quick, and I'll take Bretonnia, and we'll just throw on some randomly generated high elf nonsense here. And I'll just quickly show you my deployment. And let's see here if I can find the right build. Have all these builds saved here. And I'm not sure. Let's see. I know it's here somewhere. Anyway, weird. Anyway, there it is. So let's go ahead and load it up. It's not quite exactly how I take it. Sometimes I'll make some changes, switch to fire arrows. In fact, I had meant to switch to fire arrows rather than pox arrows in that matchup, just because obviously, like shooting at a mortis engine, for example, it has regeneration, so the fire arrows are going to be more effective in that situation. Although the poison is very nice, in pretty much any situation, if you're not expecting regenerating units, the poison arrows are the way to go. But I'll just quickly show you guys how I do my hot grouping here, just because this build is pretty micro intensive and you need to be basically perfect with those Grail Knights. Not exactly. You do have a little bit of room for error with the healing and the physical resist and everything, but you need to be on point with your Grail Knights. Otherwise you will lose. I have lost quite a few battles with this build. But it does work. I mean, you can win a lot of battles as well, and even battles against, very good factions like the High Elves and the Dark Elves, using similar type builds, you can definitely get some work done. So I'll kind of just kind of haggardly deploy my infantry here. I'd spend some more time and kind of do some fancy spacing if I were actually playing a battle, but I always put my general in group 1. And you guys don't have to do your grouping exactly like this. The one thing I would recommend in terms of grouping is that you just do the same thing every time. Establishing that consistency is the most important thing. And the Grail Guardians will stick right here, and we'll put them in with the infantry group. So this entire line here, it's just going to be big ol' group 2 for the infantry line. And again, you don't have to exactly use these same groups, but then I'll go 3 here, 4 here, and 5 here. That way you can click the appropriate key on your keyboard and zoom quickly to the right Grail Knight unit, and this way it allows you to micro all 3 relatively well. I mean, granted, my micro is not the best, guys, but this is what I do to try and mitigate that. That way I have them on quick hot groups. I can just zoom around the battlefield and make sure my Grail Knights are doing exactly what I need them to. And it is important that you stay nice and tight, but we'll kind of talk through some tactics as I show off more battles with this and similar type builds. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this battle replay and kind of a little bit of an army breakdown, I guess, in the end there. But yeah, if you like this kind of content, hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe. I'm keeping it coming with more Total War Warhammer 2 content every single day, so stay tuned for more, and we'll see you next time.